We call it wilderness. But long before European settlers arrived, before the word virgin forest was ever spoken, before anyone believed this land was untouched, it was already managed, shaped, tended, engineered. The forests were not wild, they were gardens. The fields were not abandoned, they were cultivated. The landscape itself was not natural. It was designed by peoples who had spent thousands of years learning how to make the land flourish. And when settlers arrived, they mistook all of it for accident. Most people assumed that before colonization, North America was an untamed wilderness. Vast forests where trees grew dense and unmanaged, where nature operated without human interference. And that assumption makes sense. After all, early European accounts describe endless woods, abundant game, open meadows that seemed to appear naturally. But that landscape was not natural. It was the result of deliberate human intervention, centuries of controlled burning, selective planting, and careful management that shaped the environment to support both people and ecosystems. The wilderness settlers encountered was not untouched, it was maintained. And the moment colonization disrupted that management, the land began to change. The year is 1605. The place, the coast of what the English will soon call New England, territory the Wampanoag and other Algonquian-speaking peoples have shaped for generations. The air smells of salt and pine. The forest stretches inland, but it is not the tangled, impassable thicket you might imagine. The ground beneath the trees is clear, no dense underbrush, no fallen logs blocking every path. You can walk through this forest easily. You can see for long distances. Sunlight reaches the ground, allowing grasses and edible plants to grow beneath the canopy. This is not accident. This is design. Indigenous peoples have been burning the forest floor for centuries. Controlled, intentional fires set in late autumn or early spring, when the flames stay low and manageable. These fires clear underbrush, kill pests, stimulate new growth, and create open spaces where deer and other game can graze. The result is a park-like landscape, a forest that is productive, accessible, and teeming with life. And inland, away from the coast, the pattern continues. Fields of corn, beans, and squash stretch across river valleys. Orchards of nut-bearing trees, chestnuts, walnuts, hickories, grow in groves that were planted generations ago and are now maintained by the descendants of those who first shaped them. This is not wilderness. This is agriculture. This is forestry. This is landscape management on a continental scale. The peoples of North America understood something that would take European science centuries to articulate. That fire, used carefully, is not destruction. It is renewal. Controlled burns prevented catastrophic wildfires. They enriched the soil with nutrients from the ash. They encouraged the growth of berries, tubers, and medicinal plants. They created habitat for deer, elk, and other animals that thrived in open woodlands. And this knowledge was not guesswork. It was the result of millennia of observation, experimentation, and adaptation, passed down through generations, encoded in practice, embedded in the relationship between people and place. The Three Sisters agriculture, corn, beans, and squash planted together, was another form of engineering. The corn provided a structure for the beans to climb. The beans fixed nitrogen in the soil, enriching it. The squash spread across the ground, shading out weeds and retaining moisture. This was not primitive farming. This was ecological design, a system that sustained large populations without depleting the soil, without requiring fertilizers, without exhausting the land. And it worked. For thousands of years, Imagine a young Wampanoag man in the early 1600s preparing to set a controlled burn. He carries a torch, a bundle of dried grasses wrapped around a stick lit from the central fire. He walks to the edge of a section of forest that has not been burned in several years. The underbrush is beginning to thicken. It is time. He moves carefully, lighting small fires in a pattern his father taught him. His grandfather taught his father. The flames spread slowly, consuming dead leaves, dry twigs, invasive saplings. The larger trees, thick-barked oaks and pines, are unharmed. They have survived these fires for centuries. By evening, the smoke has cleared. The ground is black with ash, but within weeks, new growth will emerge. Grasses, berries, the shoots that deer prefer. He does not know that within a generation, the practice will be forbidden. That settlers will see fire as destruction, will criminalize burning, will let the forests grow thick and tangled in ways they never were before. He does not know that without this management, the land will begin to change. Forests will darken, game will decline, and settlers will call it wilderness returning, never realizing it was the absence of management, not the presence of it. That created the tangle. The land was not wild, it was tended. And when that tending stopped, the wilderness they imagined finally began. When English settlers arrived in the early 1600s, they were astonished by what they found. Cleared fields, open forests, abundant game, fertile soil. They assumed it was providence, that God had prepared this land for them, that it was naturally abundant, that it required only European labor to unlock its potential. But what they were seeing was not natural abundance. It was the result of active management that had been ongoing for thousands of years. And when disease swept through indigenous populations, killing up to 90% in some regions before sustained colonization even began, that management stopped. The fields grew over, the forests thickened, the controlled burns ceased. The landscape began to shift into something it had not been for millennia. And settlers mistook this transformed, overgrown landscape for the original state of the land. They called it wilderness. They called it virgin forest. They saw it as proof that the land had been underutilized, that it was waiting for proper stewardship. But the opposite was true. The land had been shaped, and the absence of its caretakers was what created the wilderness settlers believed they were conquering. Here is what we rarely acknowledge. The concept of untouched wilderness is a myth, and that myth served a purpose. If the land was wild, unused, unmanaged, then it could be claimed without guilt, without recognition of the systems already in place. But the land was never empty. It was never wild. It was a cultivated landscape shaped by fire, by planting, by knowledge systems refined over thousands of years. And when settlers imposed their own agricultural systems, clear-cutting forests, plowing fields year after year, replacing controlled burns with fire suppression, the land responded differently. Soil eroded. Forests became dense and fire-prone. Ecosystems that had been stable for centuries began to collapse. Because the land had not been designed for European-style agriculture, it had been designed for something else. And that design worked until it was abandoned. This was not the beginning of land management in America. It was the interruption of something far older. The peoples who shaped these forests, who planted these fields, who understood fire as a tool and not a threat, they were not stumbling through a wilderness. They were engineers, ecologists, agriculturalists, and their knowledge did not disappear. It was carried forward, passed down, still practiced today by Indigenous communities who remember that the land was never wild. It was always a relationship. Today, scientists are rediscovering what Indigenous peoples never forgot: that fire is essential to certain ecosystems, that controlled burns prevent catastrophic wildfires, that forests managed with fire are healthier, more diverse, more resilient, and across North America, Indigenous communities are reclaiming their role as land managers, reintroducing controlled burns, restoring traditional agricultural practices, teaching a new generation what their ancestors always knew: the land remembers. And now, slowly, so do we. We call it wilderness, but now you know it was never that. It was a garden, a managed landscape, the work of countless generations who understood that to live with the land means to shape it carefully, respectfully, sustainably. And when we stopped listening to those who knew how, the land became wild, not because that was its nature, but because we forgot how to tend it. If this changed how you see the forests around you, if you realize that nature is not separate from people but shaped by them, then this is only the beginning. Subscribe to Before America, where the story starts before the maps, and the land was never as wild as we were taught.